So,
Hey, I've got some news about Discord.
yeah.
It's up, but we're not going to use it yet because it's like, yeah, let's tempt fate, right? Yeah.
I
So
will be back momentarily.
Okay, Mike's gonna take a little bit of a moment.
comfort break, right?
Yeah, that's what we call it. Um, it's interesting to start hearing the diversity in our community and hearing from really interesting people that have been in the industry for a while. It seems like we've loaded the early part of this show with industry veterans. I'm looking forward to hearing the perspective of some of the newer folks as we roll onwards. But just a bit of an update that from Ray, he indicated that there's some power outages in California. So hopefully we'll have those dealt with. That's Chris Kubaka is one of our guests coming up a little bit later on. So hopefully either she just found out how good her UPS batteries are, or they restore her power. So she'll be on. Sec Evangelism is her handle. She'll be on in about, I guess, an hour or so. So that's really good. I just have a quick Becky Pinkard story before we get her on the air here and talk to her.
Wait a minute, is this approved?
Are you already there? Yeah, no, it's a good story. Let me tell you, because I ran into you at a corporate event and we just kind of had a really great chat about infosec and alcoholism and all of that kind of stuff. And as you know, I this year I kind of worked at really getting sober, and I just want to say, Becky, it was so nice to have your support on that journey, and really
100%.
nice.
100%. And I'm super, super proud of you, man. Keep it up.
Thank you. Doing the best I can. Festive season is coming, and so it's gonna be a bit of a challenge. But for those of you who don't know Becky, tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, now a CISO of a bank. That's amazing. You've had an incredible career so far.
Who did I have to pay off to get that?
Yeah. Well, clearly hard work.
So I think for myself, it has been a long road. It's 23 years, almost 24 years in the business. And I actually have a bit of a cold right now, so I'll apologize up front for that. I'm on a large degree of Sudafed with a tree twinkling merrily in the background. So I'm either going to go one of two extremes: asleep or really crazy.
Hyper.
I'm not sure at this stage. But yeah, so 23 years in the business. I started off as a help desk analyst. I worked my way up to business help desk, and then ended up going into the NOC for the company that I was at. And that was like 1997 when I went to the NOC, and the guy that hired me, he said, well, we're going to have to put you on the overnight shift. And well, it's just going to be you and guys, how are you going to feel about that? And I just, how are they going to feel about it? And so I got stuck in from there. And then, I discovered the SANS Institute. And the SANS Institute is really the folks that put me on the path to security. Before we had social media, before we had Twitter, before we had, everyone coming together like this, podcasts, all this awesome stuff. For me, it was the SANS Institute. That's where I met other people that were passionate and just like insanely crazy about security. And they really spoke to me. And I got stuck in with those guys for a long time.
So now you went from very much a technical focus to a managerial focus. So that journey, I mean, obviously, I'm just going to speculate here. Not everything probably went perfectly. What are some of your lessons learned about sort of now becoming a suit?
Lessons learned, man. I think lessons learned, know yourself and know what you're willing to put up with. And then if you need to make a call, like about a job, staying in a job, leaving a job, working for someone, not working for someone, make that call for yourself and don't stay somewhere where you're unhappy. I've certainly been in that situation more than once. And it took me a while to figure that out. It took me a while to figure out that, number one, there's a ton of jobs out there for people in security, and that's only gotten better over the last, decade in particular. And then number two, that you can do that. Like you can change jobs, and still be nice to people. Like you don't want to burn any bridges in this community, And I've learned that. I learned that a little bit the hard way. I've certainly burnt a couple of bridges myself, and I regret that. But yeah, it's important for us to maintain professionalism in this business, and also at the same time to take care of each other and realize that, not everyone has the same passion that we do, but that doesn't decrease from what they do, in the business. And I think I had to get some age and maturity under the belt before I came into that realization for myself.
So the sort of the natural question I've got for you then is like there's folks out there that are looking for advice and counsel, and sort of I always cringe when I hear the words I just got my CISSP and I'm now going to tell you exactly how security should work. What's your view on sort of certification? I mean, obviously you promoted SANS. SANS is great. I would say
Yeah.
though SANS is a bit unaccessible to those that aren't sort of corporately backed.
Oh, it's gotten so expensive, hasn't it? Yeah. I mean, and even when I did, actually, part of the reason I went to SANS instructor route is so I could get free classes. I mean, I got to go the very first time I went because my company paid for it. And even back then, I think it was about 3K. I mean, we're talking like 2000, 2001, something like that. So yeah, someone hit me up the other day and was asking me about it. And they said, "Oh, I'm looking at this class. I know SANS. What do you think? The class is 7K." And I was like, "Oh my gosh,
Wow. Yeah.
that's some crazy money." So about certifications, I think certifications, are really helpful for a couple of reasons. I think they're great for helping people to get a sense of confidence about different topics within security. And I think when you're brand new to security, it's important in that it helps people to learn about this massive spectrum that we have in security, because it's just so much. I mean, there's just so much to do. And when you're the outsider looking in, I think that's quite overwhelming. And so I think being able to do that helps people a lot.
Can I just make a quick point about certs? Um, I find it doesn't help when the organisation doesn't define the role of the security person that well in the
Oh
company.
yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
if like anybody else, you're a little bit of a jack of all trades and a master of none, and you find yourself in your company doing security, and it can be anything from building security through to risk management, through to helping out in the SOC or whatever. I find it's quite difficult to actually nail an appropriate cert to go for. That's just
Yeah.
me. I found it really difficult.
No, I agree, but also because the company's not going to be able to back you. I think they're not going to be able to help you pin that down. And and if you, oh, so sorry, if you don't have that support, I think it makes it even more difficult. Because face it, people are always like, "Oh yeah, my company's going to pay for X, Y, Z. I'm going to go pursue this course or whatever," and then the company's not going to give you time to study for that. I've
Yeah,
worked for one company that ever set aside time for that, and all the rest of the time it was basically like, "Hey, we've paid for it. Good luck with that."
sure. Yeah, agreed.
So yeah, I think it is super important to have the company backing. But where you don't, I think it's really good for people to make use of this community and not be afraid to get stuck in. For me, I was super afraid to get stuck into the community. I people may not believe me, but I don't take rejection well. I don't like confrontation. I'm uber people pleaser. And it just was super difficult for me to get into Twitter or anything where someone, might try and tackle me for having a view,
Yeah.
which is a really stupid thing to say out loud. But
No,
that's
it's
just
not, because it's actually exactly the problem that everybody else has, I think.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm still petrified of it. I mean, I'm 40 plus years old, and I'm still petrified of someone, basically shouting at me over Twitter, which is really, really childish thing to admit. But I don't want to have those kind of conversations. I don't enjoy trolls. I'm not one of these people that likes to troll back or fight back or whatever. And so, yeah, it was difficult for me to find that community. And so I think what I would challenge people to do that are looking for it and also have that sort of level of discomfort is look for those groups that are out there. It's one of the reasons, like when the Ladies of London Hacking Society, I got introduced, and Eliza May Austin, brought that one forward. I was such an advocate for that because I thought, here's something that people can go to. It's why I think things like B-sides as well, these are great. What started off as sort of community driven efforts for people to be able to go meet others face to face and not necessarily feel, immediately that possibility of confrontation.
Yeah. Ian, did you want to continue? Sorry, mate. I stole your thunder somewhat there.
There's a surprise.
No, not at all. And I think Becky, like you're now looked at as probably one of the leading ladies in the London information security scene. And I do want to zoom in a little bit on the Lady London Hacking Society. Do you see value in sort of these peer groups? Because I understand that particular society or group is completely cross spectrum in that it's people just starting out, but then there's like some people that have been in the industry for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes all kinds of communities for us. I think people will, if they give themselves an opportunity to do so, I think hopefully they can find a community where they fit and they can find that niche where they fit. I mean, it's like if you look at religion, it's why we have, a ton of different religions. People need to find what feels right for them in order for them to find that fit in their life. And I think with the Ladies of London Hacking Society is fantastic because it does have, a great deal of expertise. And I think they need that expertise to help create the lessons and introduce the content and drive the topics and help the other people. But then you also get, those folks that love to help. And so, they're helping others that want to learn. And so it creates, again, that environment where people feel that it's okay to be a newbie. And I think that is sometimes the challenge, in our industry is that I think you come into it, and then especially if you're a woman, again, you come into it and you're like, I feel discomfort, immediately.
Yeah.
I'm a newbie. Everyone can read it on my forehead. I just want to crawl under a rock. And so I think having that type of place is important.
That's great. So within the confines of like the upper echelon of being in an organization, I mean, obviously some people are going to be respectful, and then some other people are difficult, maybe, seeing you as an executive. How do you kind of deal with those sort of circumstances where you're going to have to realign somebody's beliefs? Is there any sort of ideas or techniques that you can share?
I think I get the question. I'm going to answer it in the way that I think I get the question. How about that? The thing that's been super interesting for me being in a quote unquote executive position is I would consider my first executive role to be with Digital Shadows, where I was a member of this very small, obviously it was a startup, but Exco team. And then obviously coming into this role with the bank, it's also a small bank. We're only about 1,500 people. But it's been interesting to me because you do get treated differently, even though I myself don't feel differently. And the thing I found most challenging whenever I was at, for example, Digital Shadows, and I'd stepped into that role, is I was treated differently. And I was no longer sort of included in some of those inner circle conversations, So it was trying to balance being the normal goofy person that I always am with this sort of oddly passionate view about security and humor and the way I feel about diversity, inclusion, and injecting all of that into the role, but still being taken seriously in the role. And so I guess in terms of resetting expectations, one of the things that happened to me is I kind of went through a period of crisis about it. And I ended up talking to some phenomenal, other people in the industry. And one of those people, I'll give her a shout out right now, was Emma Smith.
Okay.
And if you don't know Emma, she's she's basically director of security at Vodafone, but only because she doesn't get to use the title because Vodafone's a little crazy with the titles. But she's the group CISO of Vodafone, like globally.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and amazing lady.
Little street cred.
yeah, just mind-boggling cred. But the thing that was amazing about that, with her, whenever I was going through this crisis of confidence and everything, I was like, oh, should I change? Am I, I shouldn't be me. How do I do this job? And she told me, she said, Becky, she said, you have to be yourself. She said, you have a passion for what you do. That's what drives you. If you change and you try to conform to something that you're not, then you're not going to be bringing that passion with you into work every day. And for me, that was just mind blowing, and that changed everything for me. And it helped me to realize then when I went for the CISO role, I interviewed for a CISO role for a year and a half.
Wow.
But it was because I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be myself. I wanted to be a peer to the CIO or CTO or whomever. And I wanted to work in an FS organization with a manager that I could learn from. And once I had decided that it was okay, I was going to go for what I wanted, I was going to be myself. And it took me a year and a half to find the right fit. But I feel so fortunate that I've landed where I have landed, because I'm with a superb group of people, and my manager is rock star awesome.
That makes a huge difference. So 2019, obviously a big year of change for you personally, professionally. A lot of people are looking into their crystal balls and are they going, what's in the future type of thing, do you see it's the same old, or do you see some new kind of challenges coming on the horizon? Where are you on sort of the look into the crystal ball?
Wow, that's a good one. I think there's always going to be a bit of the same old, and I think I heard Freaky Clown say something similar to that, and I have to agree with him. Being in the industry for a long time, you see a lot of this stuff going around and coming back around full circle, and I think we will continue to see that. I think we're going to see some other interesting things come to the surface as well. So a couple of the things that I have been harping a little bit on is I think that we have this ever-growing volume of technical debt, and I don't have a sense of confidence that companies are dealing really well with the technical debt, and then in particular that security is able to keep up with technical debt. And as a result of that, one of the silly term that I coined that I then found out an actual security startup had also started using, but I started calling it at the bank, I started referring to a shadow risk. And so I started talking about the fact that, we have to be very aware of shadow risk and of it having been created through this process of quickly developing products, looking to get to customers, looking to get to the market, taking advantage of open banking, all the cool, exciting things that are happening with new and developing technology. But then because we're trying to move at that speed and at that pace, and we're taking shortcuts where we think that we can, and then sometimes we're losing sight of the technical debt that's accumulating as a result of that, it kind of feels like it might be creeping up on us a bit. And so to me, it feels like we need to pay a lot of attention to that as we go into 2020. And the other thing I'll say is, as we see more and more people go into, these monolithic, cloud providers, I think we need to be super careful that we don't recreate single points of failure there for any issues that might occur in those environments that bring the world to a screeching halt.
Like Discord.
I wasn't gonna say it, man. You said we couldn't say it.
Becky, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
So in your role, presumably you're in meetings with the chief finance officers, CTO, CEO, chairman, etc., etc. And their conversations are generally about growth plans and projections and profit and loss and, I don't know, shoving the operational overhead down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How are you finding those conversations from a security point of view? Are you getting a lot of traction when you're interjecting with business impact and security and all that kind of stuff? I'm just interested in how the dynamic works in those kind of at that level in the organization.
Yeah. Now, I think for starters, I've been brought into, I participate in the BRC, so the Board Risk Committee. I just did my first cyber update to the Board Risk Committee. And the thing that's, interesting about that is obviously they've made time during their extensive agenda. I mean, they're looking at 200, 300 page decks for these meetings.
Yeah.
They make 15 minutes for me to come in and do sort of a quarterly or biannual, cyber update. And the thing that I was really impressed by, because I sat in on the first one, I didn't give it, but I sat in on the first one in May, and I was mega impressed by the questions that were asked. And I was mega impressed by the fact that there was legitimate care and concern, around the security aspects. Now, on the flip side, right, their main focus is we need to keep the business going because we have these customers, that are depending on our services. And obviously there's a lot of regulatory cares and concerns as well. There's the SMF, so the senior managers regime. and the what's the F framework, senior managers framework.
Yeah.
And so there's then, different liabilities that are at stake. So there's a lot of things that come to play, especially in the financial services world, which has been really interesting for me to learn about. But again, I've been impressed with the way it's coming together. It doesn't mean there's still not a lot to do. There's still a ton to do, right? It's by no stretch of the imagination perfect in my experience so far. But I just always tell people that's job security for us.
I wanna say one of the ugliest words in banking to you.
What's that?
TSB. Did you read the report?
I've not read the report yet. No.
Okay. So I found it a fascinating study in when management doesn't listen to the people on the ground,
Yeah.
and management believes that something can go into production with like over 200 identified issues.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. Well, that technical debt, man.
I think you nailed it, Becky, on that issue, is that it is a real business problem. And I think security and regulatory regimes are just going to get even tougher as we move forward.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I mean, look, again, the regulators coming down the pipeline now with op resilience, right? And operational resilience is something when I first came into the job, I hadn't heard of it. Obviously, I wasn't keeping up with that stuff. So I went and read up a little bit about it. And I have to say, I was actually surprised. I was pleasantly surprised because what I saw was the regulators looking at operational resilience and saying, basically, having disaster recovery, having business continuity planning, that no longer is alone, right? It is going to be good enough for us. Great. You're going to keep your backup processes running and everyone's going to be able to check their Slack messages. Whoopee. That's no longer the focus. The focus now with op resilience is on what is the bare minimum level of service that keeps the customer happy and keeps the customer up and running. And it's also no longer focused on if you have a problem. Now, op resilience is all about, hey, when you have a problem, how are you going to keep those services that the customer depends upon up and running and accessible and available to them? And the regulator is demanding answers to these questions. And that to me is fascinating because I love to see the regulator who is so often picked on and harped on, right? I love to see them doing something that to me feels like the right thing to do. What I wish we could do is figure out how to do that across industry, across all the verticals, and demand that level of focus because we're going to continue to see these problems happen.
Yeah, absolutely right. Another point I'd like to make. So for years we've had standards. Okay, so we're looking at ISO 27000 and X and all that kind of stuff. We're looking at the PCI DSS. We're looking at the GDPR. They're all kind of independent of each other, but they kind of broadly focus on things like data breach prevention and protections of privacy and all that kind of stuff. But is it now time that we saw a kind of international standard around information security as a thing, around operational security? So I look at the ISO 27001 documentation. It still reminds me of punch cards and AS400 and stuff like that, and things we've not done for 25 years around information security. Is it time we now have something a little bit more close to what we actually do and with a mandate and the teeth to enforce it?
Well, I agree. Absolutely. And it's something, again, I've been sort of kicking about in several different talks over about the last year, because I think so as well. And I think until we see that on a global level, I don't think we're ever going to have security get where it needs to get. Taking care of people's data in all of these different tools, services, and settings, that we now have a huge dependence on.
Yeah.
And again, the thing that really fascinates me about it, right, is it's 10 years. It's really 10 years that we've had this change. Granted, they've had, ARPANET and everything from way back when. We've had all this growing curiosity, dependence, and digital evolution. But it's the 10 years since social media came to the forefront. And then we got technology and the internet into the hands of people every day on the mobile phone. That is what has made the difference. And so now the next 10 years is going to say and show us, where are we going to go? And are we finally going to wisen up on the right way to do it? And if you think about Moore's Law, screw Moore's Law, man. We're having to evolve as humans dealing technically with all of this digital stuff. We're having to evolve beyond our capacity to evolve this quickly. but we got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah. Okay, Becky. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Well, thank you
Fascinating stuff.
guys.
Yeah,
It's
no,
been an
it's really good.
absolute pleasure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck with the rest of it.
Thanks ever so much. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Becky.